about the fact they were kind of eager to get back to work, texting him, trying to find out when they were getting back to work. This is going back a few days ago, so you get the impression that is the case. Scorecheck said it would not be a total shock if Bama got both Jahmyr Gibbs and Tank Bigsby. Obviously, Bama's going to be a player for whoever it is they want. Right now, they do have a need at the running back spot, although they have some young guys that are getting ready to kind of blossom there too. But if they want to go after running backs, obviously they're going to be a factor in almost anything. Mike Q, thanks for the kind words. Yeah, this came from the UGA Bookstore, so this is kind of like some of that Nike coaches gear that they have there. So I'll give a shout out to my friends at the UGA Bookstore. Stop over at UGA Bookstore in Athens or UGABookstore.com. You can wear what I'm wearing right now. Ken Feinberg said that Ohio State had a prolific offense and had trouble scoring. Hope we're ready. I think Ken's right about this, in that I think there's this general assumption that Georgia gets a break in the college football playoff because it doesn't have to stop an offense as prolific as Alabama's. However, I would say that trying to score on a defense as stout as what Michigan's has been is every bit the challenge of trying to stop the Alabama offense. That's certainly true. And in any kind of evaluation of what's going to happen for Georgia going forward against Michigan, you have to understand that. This Michigan defense proved itself to be very difficult for an Ohio State offense that's terrific. Now, some of that's related to being on a true road game environment. It was also very cold that day, snowing. So that probably had some impact on the Ohio State offense. But overall, I think that's a very accurate statement. Jim, oh, goodness. Commenter says, enjoyed some nice cold Classic City lagers this weekend upon your suggestion. Well, I'm glad to hear about that. Thanks for enjoying those. Appreciate that. Daniel Carl checking in. Good to see you. Let's see if there's anything else comment-wise we need to hit. Thomas T-Bone 86 saying Georgia beating Michigan. That would be a great Christmas present. Boy, I agree with that. That'd be a terrific Christmas present indeed. Jermaine King on the subject of what it would look like if Tank Bigsby does officially transfer from Auburn, joining a running back group that includes Kenny McIntosh and Kendall Milton and Branson Robinson and Jordan James, Deshaun Edwards. And he says, I wonder if anybody would leave for Georgia. Yeah, I mean, look, here's the one thing you understand, is that one way or another, the same way we kind of gravitate towards some names that are in the transfer portal. Obviously, there are a lot of folks going to be very interested if Georgia names move themselves into the transfer portal. And the odds are some people probably will. And, they're going to be people that try to, make a big deal about that. And, I just don't know that there's much you can do to prevent that here right now. But you just kind of have to roll with it. And if you have a chance to better your roster by looking at a transfer name, you're going to do that. And if you are put in the position where you have to replace someone or rearrange your depth chart because you lose someone to the transfer portal, you're just going to have to manage that there as well. Big Dog writes in to say, I feel like there's been an information dead period. When should we get information on how bowl preparation is progressing? I know they got a little break. Yeah, the reason why it feels like there's an information dead period is because it has been it's been all recruiting. Georgia coaches have been on the road nonstop. So there's been this has been a little bit of a break for the players. They're still working out and things like that. But, the bowl preparation right now is really, for the most part, non-existent. That, come Wednesday, early signing period, kind of, put a lid on it because it'll still continue into February. But, there are visits going on. There's travel going on. I talked to Shane Beamer on Friday, and Beamer said that he'd been what did he say? He'd been 9 states in the last 8 days or something crazy like that. And the Georgia coaches are maintaining a similar schedule right now. So the reason why it feels like there's no information coming out is because the Georgia coaches have just been spread all over the galaxy. And you're going to hear a lot more about the bowl post-Wednesday. Kirby will do a press conference on Wednesday related to National Signing Day. Some of those questions will almost undoubtedly be about Michigan. And so you'll hear a little bit more then. Now, Smart may choose not to say very much, but after Wednesday, you're going to start hearing more about the bowl game there at that point. All right, are we up on the other platforms now? All right, good stuff. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, welcome to all of you. Appreciate that. Bill Hooks on the subject here of the transfer portal. Yeah, of all the things that have become new in the world of college sports over the last few years, NIL and all the things you might potentially mention there, I think the transfer portal is the thing that the coaches themselves hate the most. Now, of course, there's always going to be the hypocrisy in the minds of some. Well, the coaches certainly don't mind bouncing from job to job, so why shouldn't the players be able to do the same thing? That's the argument that's been had over and over again. But in terms of the new rules in college sports that have the greatest destabilizing effect, it's not NIL, because honestly not that many people are even really cashing in on the name, image, likeness to a great degree. Some of what you've heard has probably been grossly exaggerated. But the transfer portal is the kind of thing. We've had, multiple days recently with 100-plus players entering the transfer portal, and it may even get even more so as bowl season kind of comes to a close here in a few weeks. So that is definitely a destabilizing effect for college football for sure. Jermaine King asking about, I heard that. I don't know if that's true or not, but I did hear that. But I don't know if that's true. All right, so good stuff. Glad to have you with us. It's John Stinchcomb later on. Dan Lanning to Oregon. What does that mean? First of all, it means great things for him. And what does it mean for Georgia? We'll try to figure that out. Also, where do things stand for UGA? After a big visit weekend with a few days left before the early signing period starts on Wednesday, we'll talk about all of that. What a time it is to be a UGA fan. What a day it is to be doing a show like this, where almost invariably we're going to have a very hard time covering all the news that can be covered. And the time we have allotted, we're going to try not to make the show 6 hours long here. So let's get it going. It's DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Windows and Door of Georgia. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Windows and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So a lot to do today. Let's go ahead and jump right in it. One of the things that you see happen in college sports over and over again, college football in particular, is that the very best recruiting programs kind of remain the very best recruiting programs. What does the kids say? Kings stay kings. There's a way in which that seems to be true for college football. And one of the reasons why that is because of the infrastructure in place. That when you're taking care of business for the current recruiting cycle, you can always kind of work ahead and, lay foundation for 2023 and 2024. We understand all of that. But there's also these sort of unfair kind of built-in advantages that kind of also work to your benefit too, and Georgia certainly has plenty of those. For instance, Georgia's one of the 4 teams that's still alive for the college football playoff. That is in itself kind of free, earned media, where Georgia gets a lot of attention that a lot of other college football programs cannot really dream of having. Plus, when you have a history of putting guys into the NFL and those players play in these kind of high-profile games, huge TV audience, it kind of becomes its own commercial for your program too. And then every now and then, one of your former players will kind of take that extra step to really kind of punch that and to really kind of emphasize that a little bit more. I'm not saying that Georgia linebacker Roquan Smith did this intentionally, but the timing on this could not have worked out any better. Of course, Roquan, the former Butkus Award winner there at UGA, and it was so much fun to see this year Nakobe Dean, a linebacker that was once tabbed with being the next Roquan. It was so much fun to see a guy like Nakobe Dean truly follow in Roquan Smith's footsteps and live up to that hype and win the Butkus Award there himself. It's quite a legacy that has happened for Georgia with the linebacker position here over the course of the last few years. Well, last night, this is a very quick, short clip, but last night, as Roquan was announcing himself as a starter in that game against Green Bay, he kind of gave a nice little shout out to UGA that whether he did this intentionally or not, the timing could not have worked out better for Georgia, as we had a couple of days away from the start of the early signing period. This very briefly, Roquan Smith from national television.
Roquan Smith, LBU, Georgia.
First of all, you love the way he kind of draws that at the end there, the Georgia. You love the idea of that. And we've had Roquan on DawgNation Daily before, and Roquan's talked with us before about how much he loved his time there at UGA and how much he does want to see other great players follow in his footsteps and come there to Georgia there as well. And in particular, this notion that Georgia now can kind of cite itself as something of a linebacker university. That's what Roquan Smith meant, obviously, by the LBU phrase. And Roquan starts all that in the Kirby Smart era. A guy like Nakobe Dean continues all of that here this year. And you have to imagine this does make things a little easier for Georgia when it recruits that next generation of linebackers that have a chance to do what Roquan and Dean and guys like that have done. And hard not to think about the visit weekend ongoing at Georgia this past weekend when big names were on hand. And I tell you a guy who is – this has been a 2022 cycle that has been filled with what I think of as fan favorites. Guys like Jalen Walker and Malachi Starks and Big Bear Alexander are always very active on social media, very – aggressive with their commentary when they're asked to talk about UGA. They always have a lot to say, always seem to be big fans of the program. A guy that has not taken a backseat to anybody right now on that front is Julian Humphrey. The recent, we'll call him a flip from Florida. He decommitted from the Gators and pretty soon after that recommitted to the University of Georgia, or I should say committed to the University of Georgia on the heels of that Florida decommitment. And man, Humphrey just seems to really enjoy himself some UGA, really love UGA, and it's fun to watch that. It's one of the things that's just true now. The modern age in which we live in, the presence of social media, things like that, just make the act of following recruiting so much easier to do. We see things now that pre-social media we wouldn't be able to do. Pre-internet we definitely wouldn't be able to do. We're just kind of more of a part of the inner workings of some of this kind of stuff on a big weekend because a lot of these guys are good enough to share it there on social media. And in light of Roquan Smith calling Georgia Linebacker University, and obviously to see Nakobe Dean follow up and win the Butkus Award here this year. Kind of fun to see Julian Humphrey's tweet over the weekend where he also had himself, of course, Humphrey, a Georgia commit, he had himself a big-time linebacker name right there next to him there as well. Let me show you this on the screen. This from Humphrey on Twitter showing off Shamar James. That's also Chandler Smith, the wide receiver, who Jeff Sintel talked about on Friday when he joined us on DawgNation Daily. There they are having a good time. By the way, it was very foggy in Georgia this weekend. I saw some other photos. You kind of see this in the background, a little bit of the photo if you're watching on video. That red hue in the stadium when they have the red lights turned on was made even cooler by the presence of the fog. That red light shining in that fog made the stadium, on some of the photos I saw this weekend, look really pretty remarkable. Of course, Humphrey's caption to this is "Notice anything?" 3 former Florida commits all standing there in Athens. So as a Gator hater, we like that. But to see to see James, Shamar James, to see James getting the red carpet, no pun intended, rolled out for him in light of what Roquan said on TV and what Georgia has done in the linebacker spot, that is really fun to consider there too. So still too early for me to know what's going to go down with Shamar James before National Signing Day is over and done with. I think the odds are that Alabama remains kind of a factor in this recruitment, James hailing from the state of Alabama, but it certainly seems like Georgia's in a pretty good position, and it's got great success to sell at the linebacker position to get a guy like James in the fold. And if you're curious more about C.J. Smith there, who, as I said before, Jeff talked about on Friday, go back and listen to Friday's edition of DawgNation Daily if you missed that. A good update on James. Jeff thinks it's very realistic. Good update on Chandler Smith. Georgia needs help at the wide receiver position. A guy like Smith might be a name to consider there. Fun to hear all of that from the perspective of Jeff Sintel from Friday on DawgNation Daily. Make sure you check that out. Now, the other big story we're going to have to cover from a number of different angles today is obviously Dan Lanning moving on from Georgia defensive coordinators, the Georgia defensive coordinator role, and becoming Oregon head coach. We'll talk about this from the on-field impact in a moment. Let me talk about this from the recruiting impact now. And when I was on video with you for a little bit on Saturday, and I had to do kind of a quick video on that just because it was my son's birthday and I was kind of in the midst of all of that. And so I kind of popped on for a few minutes to give you kind of some stream of conscious type thoughts about Lanning moving on. Not really a surprise. A guy like that's in the mix for a head coach. I was certainly very impressed that a man as young as Lanning, just 35 years old, getting a chance to move into one of the more high-profile jobs in all of college football. As I said before, that Oregon job is probably the second best job in the Pacific time zone, probably only behind USC, probably the second most prestigious job, maybe west of the Colorado River, in that kind of area of our country that's west of the state of Texas. The Oregon job, because of all the Nike money and because Ducks have been in a college football playoff, Ducks played for a BCS title game back in 2010. That's a pretty prestigious, high-profile job. Dan Lanning gets himself a really good job by getting this, and a lot of Georgia fans are kind of left to wonder, well, what does this mean for the 2022 class? You can go to DawgNation.com and you can see a long list of Georgia defensive pledges that very much and very quickly reaffirm their commitment to UGA, even in light of the Dan Lanning news. And so that was a nice thing to see. And I guess understanding that those guys, for the most part, have all remained solid with Georgia throughout this process, it becomes fair to ask, well, What about a guy that Georgia's trying to get in on and get in good with here in the late stages last minute? For instance, like a guy like Marvin Jones Jr. That's a position group that even, Lanning, that's an edge rusher type guy. That's the kind of guy that Lanning would have even greater influence on, you would think. And I'll show you this image of Jones from his visit to Georgia here this weekend. This is certainly a name worth, watching here at the end if you're kind of thinking about some of those Georgia stretch goals. Those opportunities for Georgia to kind of get in late with the kind of guy that would take an already great recruiting class and put it into the stratosphere. A guy like Marvin Jones Jr. is an example of that. I mean, it just goes without saying that losing Lanning right here before the start of the early signing period might not help Georgia with Jones very much. But, I don't know that I would have considered Georgia the favorite with Marvin Jones Jr. anyway, and that's not to say that they can't win that recruiting battle come Wednesday. They obviously clearly could, but they're going to now have to do that without Dan Lanning. So that's just some of the moving pieces and parts that go along with that. That there's never a great time to lose an assistant coach. You're always right ahead of some sort of deadline somewhere. It just so happens this time of year is right there before the start of that early signing period. So I know that Georgia's going to try to keep that full court press on Marvin Jones Jr. here and see if they can win with him late. But doing so without Dan Lanning obviously makes that job a little bit more difficult. So the bottom line is this. Georgia hosted a bunch of major targets here this weekend. And if you want to go back and listen to what Jeff Sentell said on Friday, it seems like going into that weekend, Georgia felt like it had an inside track on a lot of those names, James included. Marvin Jones Jr. will have to wait and see about that. But Georgia's still in the mix in a very big way for some of the big, committed prospects here for the class of 2022. So it's doing work on that. Simultaneous to all that, it's doing work in the college football playoff there as well. It'll do that without Dan Lanning. And as far as what else is going on in the absence of Lanning at UGA, we'll talk more about that as the show rolls on. But first, let's introduce things for you here for a moment. Take care of a little business. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Windows and Door of Georgia. And we're glad to have you with us, whether you join us at 9:45 for our First and 15 on the DawgNation app or at DawgNation.com, or if you pop on at 10 a.m. on video, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, radio, of course, at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcast form, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. All the other podcast platforms there as well. Big thanks to you for being with us today, and also a huge thanks to our friends at Pella Windows and Door of Georgia for making all of this possible. Great stuff from our friends at Pella Windows and Door of Georgia. They equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors, and that's important this time of year because you've got energy in your house, and energy bills right now are, as we head into the true heart of the winter season, are probably more expensive than they've been in quite some time. You hear about this all over the place. And obviously, for the money that you spend on the energy, you want to keep it inside your house. And that's what better windows and doors give you a chance to do, the kind that are offered to you by Pella Window and Door. They got great expert people that want to have a consultation with you and want to talk to you about all the installation options you have, all of the choices that you can make, the very best windows and doors you can put in your house, the kind of stuff that you're going to be proud of, the kind of stuff that looks good on the outside, feels good on the inside. That is what Pella Window and Door of Georgia offers for you. They got great savings for you as well. Right now, you can get 40% off qualifying installations or 0% APR for 24 months. So great savings on all of that and a great way to get in touch with them. How about PellaofGA.com/DawgNation? That's the website. PellaofGA.com/DawgNation. You can also give them a call, 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is viewed to be the best. We'll have John Stinchcomb here coming up in just a little bit. Before that, though, let's get ready to go around the doghouse, assisted today by our friends at AAA. And I want to get in more into the Dan Lanning situation. A lot of you are aware of the timeline here. Chip Towers reported this story, broke the story on Friday, that Dan Lanning was leaving to go be Oregon head coach. This, on the side of things for Lanning, is just a huge deal. This is as I mentioned a moment ago, this is a terrific job for such a young coach to be getting. And obviously it speaks to the success that the Georgia program has had, that guys like this are leaving for such big jobs. Mel Tucker left the Georgia defensive coordinator role to go become Colorado head coach. A couple years later, he's at Michigan State. Now he's making $100 million, $10 million a year, something crazy like that. Sam Pittman was Georgia offensive line coach. He leaves and goes and becomes Arkansas head coach. That the success that Georgia has enjoyed has benefited the assistant coaches that have worked under Smart. And that's the kind of thing as a UGA fan you ought to celebrate and be happy about, because I think it also speaks to your ability to attract other big names into these roles. Folks, pay attention to this kind of stuff. The kind of driven, ambitious coaches that you want employed at Georgia are also looking for places where they can have professional advancement. Pretty clearly, you see Georgia being a place for all of that. Now, the question in the aftermath of this is, well, what does this mean for Georgia with Lanning now gone? We talked about the recruiting angle of this before, the fact that seemingly every recruit that was already in the fold seems to have reaffirmed their pledge to UGA through this. That's good news. You're kind of left to wonder about, well, how about those guys that are kind of out there in the open market still, whether it be like a Christian Miller type or we mentioned specifically a Marvin Jones Jr. or, on you might go with some of those guys. I think some of that still remains to be seen, but obviously Georgia has a well-built-out recruiting apparatus that they are. I mean, one of the things you can't discount is Georgia's ability to quickly inform its recruits. We have seen examples before when coaches leave. A lot of recruits are left in the dark. I'm talking about other programs around college football, and that's not really a good way to do long-term business. I think you trust Georgia pretty well to quickly inform the recruits that will be impacted by Lanning's departure, to kind of let them know how Georgia plans on moving on without Dan Lanning, which I think makes folks feel comfortable. Or if you're a guy like let's just use a Marvin Jones Jr. as an example of this. If you enjoy a Georgia visit, but you hear about Lanning while you're on that visit, and you're kind of left to wonder, well, what does this mean for me going forward? I think Georgia has enough infrastructure in place that it can kind of help explain to a guy like that, this is what is changing, this is what's not changing, here's what you already like about Georgia, here's how that's going to maybe remain the same even without Lanning here before. Georgia's just seemingly pretty good at doing those kinds of things. Also, I think this kind of leaves a lot of Georgia fans wondering themselves with some confusion. Smart did come out pretty quickly on Saturday with a statement related to all of this. Let me read you the Kirby Smart statement. What I did was I just kind of took a picture of this straight off the DawgNation homepage, the story from DawgNation.com, and I'll read the Kirby Smart statement. So Smart says, we are so happy for Dan and his family. He and Sophia have been an important part of our Bulldog family for the last 4 years, and we thank them for all they did for Georgia and the Athens community. Opportunities like this are a testament to a successful program. While he will coach with us for the upcoming college football playoff, we will move forward with Glenn Schumann and Will Muschamp as co-defensive coordinators. Dan and I are both looking forward to preparing for the college football playoff. So let me make a statement. Let me also admit something after that. The one thing you want to see if you're a Georgia fan is stability from your program. You don't want to see, I'll use an example here. Think about a school like LSU where you've like this constant revolving door of guys into the transfer portal, coaches are on the move, there are all these weird rumors that kind of pop up. Even if you win a national championship, which LSU did in 2019, ultimately success like that becomes not really sustainable over the long haul because there's just so much craziness going on around the program. There's nothing you can do to keep your assistant coaches from becoming targets of other programs' job. And if a Georgia assistant's offered the head coaching position at Oregon, of course he's going to take that. So you really have very little control over that. Eventually programs are just going to come for your coaches if you're successful enough. But you do have some control over how you respond to all of this. Are you able to act quickly? Are you able to no pun intended, get your ducks in a row, obviously that being the mascot of Oregon, can you get your ducks in a row very quickly to have a very strong statement in response to Lanning moving on? Still staying here for the college football playoff. Admittedly, his attention's going to be divided, but as a presence, he's still here, so there's no additional distraction by Lanning not being here anymore. So that's a box checked. Georgia's able to say, we've got co-defensive coordinators in place, Glenn Schumann and Will Muschamp, so that's kind of a box check. That's a question that would be asked, and Smart's able to provide an answer for that for recruits right now and for for just fans who kind of wonder about preparations for the college football playoff. Now, admittedly, and this is one of those things I even told some of my DawgNation colleagues this morning, what's not obvious to me, and maybe it's obvious to everybody else, maybe I'm just not very smart, what's not obvious to me is, does this mean these guys are also co-defensive coordinators after the college football playoff? Is this an announcement this is done? Is there still the potential of of a Schumann being on someone else's radar. It seems like that might be the case, or even a Will Muschamp potentially on someone's radar there as well. Maybe that's the case there as well. Like, it's not obvious to me necessarily that what Smart said, and I even kind of alluded to this on the video a little bit that I was doing on Saturday, is that the announcement comes, but it doesn't quite have the like in 2021, it seems like the official announcement's a social media edit where you have like the two faces side by side, staying home or some sort of graphic like that as a way of announcing that Muschamp and Schumann aren't going anywhere. This doesn't quite seem to rise to that level. Does that mean that there's still more movement to come? Obviously, the thought is that Lanning might try to attract a couple of guys off this Georgia roster to go be, coaching roster to go be on his coaching staff there at Oregon. You typically want to hire guys that you know. And the one thing we still don't know right now is what happens to that 10th. If Schumann and Muschamp are staying and they are going to be co-defensive coordinators moving forward, that still leaves Georgia with an open spot there and a 10th coach to still hire, assuming that right now Scott Cochran, from a health standpoint, not quite ready to step back into a role like that again. So there's still a lot of unanswered questions. And admittedly, the biggest one for me is, okay, so what does this mean then after the college football playoff? Does this guarantee, does this secure that Schumann and Muschamp will have this role together moving forward? I'm guessing that if you're a Georgia fan, you may have to still wait for a couple of more dominoes to fall before you can say that for sure, but certainly a very strong possibility that is the case. I guess I'd also add this, and we'll talk to John Stinchcomb more about this in just a moment. There's also that thing of, well, if they're co-defensive coordinators, at a certain point in time, one guy seemed to sort of take precedent over the other. And in the past, that was kind of Dan Lanning over Glenn Schumann, because technically Schumann's kind of had that co-defensive coordinator role before. You almost kind of wonder now there's bowl press conference where the defensive coordinator has to speak. There's like the kickoff of the season in Athens where typically both coordinators are heard from, and then we don't really hear from them again at all during the season. That's always kind of been Lanning before. You almost wonder now if it's Schumann's turn to do that. And even if it is a Muschamp-Schumann thing, Muschamp, of course, the more experienced of the two, if Muschamp isn't quite ready just to sort of let Glenn Schumann have that spotlight to himself, Muschamp in kind of a phase of his life currently where he's a little bit content to be back in the shadows a little bit, not saying that he's always going to want to do that for his coaching career. At some point in time, stepping back into a more prominent role, either at Georgia or as a head coach again somewhere else, maybe something he wants to do. But for now, he might be content to let Schumann kind of have some of that spotlight. So those are some of the just sort of the speculative things that are kind of on my mind here a little bit as we wait to see, does the Schumann-Muschamp announcement from Smart on Saturday become permanent post-college football playoff? I reckon we'll figure all that out there at the time. But obviously Georgia would seem to be in good hands with its defense. Very smart defensive-minded coach in Kirby. Obviously Will Muschamp's been around the block a bunch of times. You're happy to have his institutional expertise. And, of course, Glenn Schumann, much like Dan Lanning and Trey Scott, some of these other guys that Smart has hired, this is clearly a star on the rise in the coaching ranks, and Georgia's happy to have him. His recruiting prowess with some of the linebackers we mentioned a moment ago and everything else is clearly a still valuable asset there for UGA. We'll make that around the doghouse. It is assisted today by our friends at AAA. And, of course, traveling a lot this time of year, many of you doing that too, not just for football, but for the holiday season there too. And, of course, AAA's legendary roadside assistance, the kind of thing you're glad to have as you do all of that. But it's also great to know AAA when it comes to auto insurance as well. In fact, if you go to this website, AAA.com/auto insurance, you can find more about that and figure out all the great ways that AAA is doing good stuff for you in the space of auto insurance. Really expert folks, expert agents who can help explain your options to you and find out how when you switch, you can save big time with our friends at AAA. So check them out online, AAA.com/auto insurance. Also, give them a call, 866-380-1637. That's 866-380-1637, and you can check that out from our friends at AAA today. All right, big show coming up for us here. More recruiting stuff before we're done. There were some high-profile Georgia targets, one of them a Georgia commit, who were entertained by Florida over the weekend. What does that mean for Billy Napier as he tries to get his staff up and running? What does that mean for Georgia in particular here, maybe doing some last-minute battling with Florida over some recruiting names? We'll try to figure that out before we're done. I'm going to have some fun with a viral video that probably most of you saw here this weekend, and I'm going to explain to you why it actually has a little bit closer tie-in to me personally than you might realize. Possibly I'm having to send out a cease and desist letter here coming up. So we will talk about that before we're done. But a lot of news related to Dan Lanning moving on to become Oregon head coach, how that impacts Georgia in particular. Let's do all of that right now. Classic City Lager Insider Update. Let's talk to John Stinchcomb here on DawgNation Daily.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So let's say hello to John Stinchcomb, Classic City Lager Insider Update with him. A lot to discuss. A lot of this related to what goes on with Dan Lanning over the weekend. And John, I apologize for not remembering in your career. Did you lose a position coach or an offensive coordinator? I mean, I guess you were a part of a head coach transition, so I guess that's an obvious answer to that is a yes. But as a guy like you who's kind of going through your Georgia career, when you do lose the coach that you most closely connect to, what does that do to a player? I mean, how much do you spend worrying about that? Maybe you don't worry about that at all. But what's it like for a player when they do lose maybe the coach that they felt closer to than their even their head coach?
Well, it's a little bit different when it's in the middle of a season where you're still playing, I would imagine. Well, actually, I can speak from experience there as well. So while we were at Georgia, we had 5 offensive line coaches. The first being, I'm blanking. This is terrible. He went to be head coach at Tulane, Coach Selfo.
Yeah.
Jeez, wow. I am getting old. All those shots to the head.
I tell you what, John, I was getting a little worried there for a second.
Man. Woo!
Thought I got to give you some smelling salts.
Yep, for real. I need them. But so he left to Tulane. Well, that happened between seasons, and it happened again a few more times in our tenure there at Georgia. But mid-season wise, it was Pat Watson who died of a heart attack, and that was a traumatic experience for us. But we had in-house some coaches that kind of filled that void and stepped in. And when you experience that kind of transition, obviously it was shocking and a little bit different than what they're going through right now. So as a player, what you're looking for is some symmetry, sense of familiarity, and I think that's what Georgia has in spades right now. And not only Coach Schumann and his experience in those meetings and in that room and with those players, but also the addition of Coach Muschamp, who, let's remember, at the beginning of the season, he was going to be stuck in an office and not have any on-the-field relationships with the players, but that quickly changed just from other staffing issues there in Georgia. And I think it's really to the benefit of this team and this defense that they have such cohesion. And when I heard Coach Lanning was moving on to Oregon, one, you're excited for him, and you think those kind of opportunities are going to come just because of the success of the program, and he won't be the last in a long line of what I would expect to be coordinators and position coaches that have greater opportunities due to the success of this Georgia football team. But when you lose a coach of his caliber, to hear that he's going to stick around as position coach and kind of offload those coordinating duties, I think that's the best scenario that you could hope for if a coach is going to transition while you're still playing.
No, I think that's exactly right. I want to talk to you about a lot of that. Let me get one more kind of sort of procedural question out of the way. Like, I've had players tell me before, former players at schools across the South, that they didn't really feel like they knew I don't want to say they didn't feel like they knew their head coach, but they certainly didn't feel like they knew him as well as they knew the guy they were directly playing for. Now, Kirby may be a little bit different because he's younger and he's the kind of energetic guy that seems to have his hand in everything. So maybe these Georgia players feel like they know Kirby better than maybe certain players feel like they know certain coach. But, I've had players tell me it's not like I'm just going to walk into my head coach's office at any point in time. The guy they just sort of felt the most comfortable communicating with was either strength coach or their position coach. And obviously Lanning's kind of had that role as outside linebacker that even if Georgia's able to capably replace Lanning from a football standpoint, I believe it will be able to, that this is the kind of thing that impacts the players that probably knew Lanning the best, right?
Absolutely. And I think that, Coach Smart has a defense background. He's probably more, this is speculation, but it's educated speculation considering all the experience that players have had in similar situations where Coach Smart's probably much more engaged with that defensive side of the ball. And you've got other coaches with head coaching and coordinating experience with Coach Muschamp and really across the board. So being able to absorb that kind of hit, I think you're better suited in this scenario than other teams and other situations could provide. So, Coach Lanning is a great coach, and you're grateful for him. I'm grateful that it's not an SEC East school because he's certainly a great coach that we've been the beneficiaries of his tutelage of the team up to this point. So you wish him well, and kind of grateful that it's all the way across the country because, he's a great coach who's been under the leadership of Coach Smart, and I'm sure that's been to benefit of him and his future coaching career.
So I want to ask you more about what this means for Georgia in the college football playoff here in a moment. Before that, though, let me kind of ask this way, that I think you and I are on the same page, that if you're Georgia and you lose a defensive coordinator to become Oregon head coach, especially a guy as young as Lanning, that to me says a lot of really good things about the program. It's the kind of thing that would attract other coaches to this program because everybody wants professional development. The kind of ambitious guys that Georgia seeks want to be at places where they can obviously have professional advancement, and you want to kind of ride that steam over the course of years. That this is just kind of the way it is if you're at elite college football level. Eventually, though, over the course of time, year after year after year, that it does put a little bit of a strain on the program to keep losing guys like this. For instance, I think one of the most amazing things about Alabama is the way they've replaced coordinators now so many times over the course of so many years, and they haven't really lost the thing that's made them Alabama throughout that entire process. I think Georgia's a long way away from feeling that kind of strain on the program, but eventually this will be Kirby's toughest job, or among his toughest jobs, replacing guys like this over and over the more you have success. For now, the replacement options are really easy because you've still got a lot of the original nucleus in place for this Georgia defense. But over the course of time, this job does not get any easier when you keep having to replace guys like Lanning. You find them, you use them, they advance. Now you're looking for the next one. That's probably one of the toughest parts about being a head coach, right?
Yes, I see two sides to this coin. I think you look at the defensive coordinator position at Georgia, and it very easily could be one of the main contributing factors to the reason why Coach Richt, his tenure ended at Georgia, just with the possibility of having 3 defensive coordinators in 3 years, along with some offensive coordinator issues, and that rearing its ugly head at the end of his time here at Georgia. So that's one side of the coin. You have a couple missteps or identity crises where you bring in a guy who's a talented coach, but it doesn't fit the identity of your program that you've created. You can see where that's an issue. And on the other side of the coin, you look at Alabama. I think they've been the standard for quite some time in their ability to bring in good coaches and have them weave into the fabric of the program that you've created. And Coach Smart has created an identity in this program of what he wants it to be and who some of the defining characteristics of that program, what it's going to be no matter who walks through the door, whether it's a player or a coach. But when you have success, that's an attractant, and not only for 4- and 5-star players, but also if you were to give stars for coaches, you're going to be able to attract and draw some supremely talented and gifted coaches that you want to be a part of your program. And I think that's the standard by which Georgia has created, by which Coach Smart has created, where whether it's young, ambitious coaches or established veterans in the field, they want to be a part of this program. And there's an understanding that takes place that when you draw and attract coaches of that caliber, it's probably not going to be as long-term as some of the other situations and possibilities that are out there because of the ambition side of things. It's the same thing when you attract 4- and 5-star players. There's a little bit of an understanding that their goal is within 3 years, sometimes 4, but very rarely 5, they'll be moving on to greener pastures.
So Lanning's going to stay for the playoff. That kind of eliminates that as a distraction. I don't think Georgia will get anywhere near his full attention. Obviously, he's got a very big job ahead of him as Oregon head coach, but at least his presence keeps that from being kind of like one of these glaring omissions, something along those lines. But I also am kind of the belief that with what Georgia has, Kirby defensive mind, Will Muschamp, obviously respected defensive mind, Glenn Schumann, who I also think is a rising star in the coaching ranks, even guys like Trey Scott, who I think are rising stars in the coaching ranks. I guess I'd be hard-pressed to imagine that Georgia's all that injured on the field by not having, Lanning as the chief architect of this defense for the Orange Bowl coming up against the Wolverines. Do you think I'm running the risk of I guess, underestimating what it means to have this kind of personnel switch right before a big game?
No, it certainly is a factor, and you want to minimize the negative effects of losing a defensive coordinator while you're still playing for national championships, right? And I think Georgia has done that really well. You want Coach Lanning to be around. You want him to be a part of the process, but you also know that he's no longer singularly focused as the defensive coordinator of that unit. So I think very strategically, in a very smart way, they figured out a better plan. And that plan is to lean on coaches that have been with this team the entire season. Coach Schumann, Coach Smart have been much longer in the schematic approach and those discussions. And like you say, it's more of a team effort. But to keep Coach Lanning around, I think that keeps the consistency and the cohesion in the group. And then you've got enough bright minds that understand what's gotten you to this point and some of the things and really the schemes that you're going into a game with, the approach, if you will, for each game, and are able to rely on that experience, but also kind of bring some of their own take in it. And, I don't expect, whether it's Coach Schumann or Coach Muschamp, I don't think they're going to veer too far from the script that Georgia has used to succeed up to this point, because they were in those discussions. I'm sure they had a voice while Lanning was at the helm, and now will continue on with that same analysis and approach and schematic attack of any offense that they face this year, because they've been a part of it this entire time.
It's our Classic City Lager Insider Update with John Stinchcomb. Heard from some folks in our video comment section before the show began today. They enjoyed some Classic City Lager over the weekend. I'm glad to hear folks doing that. It's a great time of year with obviously still plenty of football going on, but also holiday parties, family get-togethers. Classic City Lager goes great with that. So pick yourself up some. You're out there doing your shopping anyway. You're getting all kinds of food and things like that for your parties and get-togethers. Well, get some Classic City Lager to go with it. It's from Creature Comforts Brewing Company. It's a taste of Athens, but you don't have to be in Athens to enjoy it. Wherever you're doing your shopping, you can pick some up, 6 and 12-pack cans, available all year long. It's a lager-style beer. That means lighter in color, but it's a craft-style lager. That means great flavor. We love it here. It's Classic City Lager. It's good cold beer. Make sure you try some today. John, we'll get ready to wrap things up here with you in a couple of moments, but I think the other thing that I'm still not 100% sure about is with the announcement from Smart on Saturday, kind of tabbing Muschamp and Schumann as co-defensive coordinators. It seems likely that could also be the plan kind of after the bowl game, but maybe I'm talking about going into 2022. But obviously, maybe there's a chance that someone still comes after a Schumann or maybe even still comes after a Muschamp. But presuming that Georgia could hold on to this tandem and keep Muschamp and Schumann as the co-defensive coordinators, I'm kind of the belief that as valuable as Muschamp is, and obviously you want someone who has as much experience as he does, that's just kind of a big name who's proven himself to be a great recruiter. I don't know that Schumann, even though his resume is a little smaller and he's obviously a little younger, I don't know that Schumann's really less valuable right now to Georgia than what Will Muschamp would be. And by the way, I said the same thing a year ago about Lanning there too, that's a young guy that when Georgia was able to keep him from going to a place like Texas, I think that set Georgia up for defensive success there in 2021. I think the results speak for themselves there on that, and much the same way going forward. For as valuable as Will Muschamp is, for all the reasons that he would be, I think that Schumann is also really valuable too, even though he's not as well-known a name to kind of the casual fan around the SEC as Muschamp would be.
Yeah, I think that's very fair to say, and he obviously has the respect of the rest of the staff and Coach Smart in particular because of his designation of co-coordinator. I think it could have been an easy transition for either coach, whether it was Coach Muschamp or Coach Schumann. But when you put them on even footing, especially for these two games, I think it's a tip of the cap to their work that they've put in to get this defense to this point in the season. And, Coach Schumann for years has been one of the names folks in the know have tabbed as undervalued or unrecognized as most assistant coaches are. I mean, they're not getting a lot of the praise and pub when the team has success. But for those that have been behind the scenes, they've often referenced Coach Schumann as one of the integral pieces, not only in recruiting, but just the player development and engagement and raising this defense to the level that they've played at these past few years.
John, it is always a great pleasure to have you here as part of our Classic City Lager Insider Update. Thank you so much for your thoughts on all of this. Obviously, eventually we'd like to move on, kind of look at Michigan on the field. We'll get a chance to do that as soon as all this other personnel stuff is kind of stabilized there. So pretty soon we'll get a chance to take a deeper look at the Orange Bowl. I look forward to doing that with you. But in the meantime, just hope you're enjoying your holiday season. We appreciate you spending some of your time with us here on the Classic City Lager Insider Update today.
Always a good time, BA. Go Dogs.
Good stuff there from John Stinchcomb.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, so great stuff. Obviously, Georgia now moving on with a new face at the helm defensively. It's going to be the tandem of Glenn Schumann, Will Muschamp for now. We'll see how long that lasts. Dan Lanning, I think he's actually going to have a press conference today, talk about the start of his time there at Oregon. There's been a little bit of chatter about, and I realized there's all kinds of controversy on Friday. Most of that I just find to be the silliest stuff in the world, the way that people kind of piled on Chip Towers, but all of that. But nonetheless, there was a little bit of, stuff on Friday when Chip broke the story, and then there was the weird thing about Justin Wilcox kind of came out yesterday. So I know there's a little bit of weirdness kind of surrounding and connecting the Oregon job right now. That ain't Dan Lanning's problem. This is a big-time job to have, and you get a chance to step into this role here. That's big bucks for him. That's big, that's notoriety. That's, one of the more well-known jobs, certainly in the Pac-12, that part of the country. So big step up for Dan Lanning here as he moves on to head coach there at Oregon. I guess we'll hear from Lanning on this Monday about the start of his era there, and maybe we'll start to find out more about how he plans on kind of filling out the rest of his staff. One thing to be aware of when it comes to the Oregon side of this, one of the big issues for Lanning, obviously he's a defensive-minded guy. Mario Cristobal, kind of a tough-minded dude who always had pretty good defenses there at Oregon and pretty good offensive lines, but did not really have explosive offense, is that there are a lot of Ducks fans who are ready to see that offense perform better there for Oregon. It's been a long time since the glory days of Mark Helfrich and what he had, at quarterback there for a while, and obviously Chip Kelly before that, who clearly, had great success with a very high-powered offense there. Oregon has not really been that team in a number of years. So, what Lanning does on the offensive side of the ball is going to be a big part of that discussion there, too. We got more SEC news to give you as we go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean today. And, of course, I'm going to remind you again, if you've got big plans to maybe celebrate with someone heading towards Christmas, no better gift to do as we head towards this holiday time of year than to invite them to be with you on the DawgNation Cruise. I have heard from so many of you who have booked your travel. You've made official plans to do this, and I'm really glad. It's going to be an amazing getaway. It's happening in April, but we're booking our travel right now. We've got to do that while space is available. So you'll hear me say this to you a lot here. We're taking as many folks as we can. This is one of those things. We're going to make this a huge deal. Tons of Georgia fans on board. Obviously, so many of the DawgNation folks. We have some special guests there as well. Unlike anything we've ever done, setting sail from Port Canaveral on April 25th, going to Nassau in the Bahamas, going to Perfect Day Coco Cay, going on the gorgeous Independence of the Seas, a beautiful ship there, a part of Royal Caribbean. It's great to have Royal Caribbean even back on the seas again, obviously after what we've all been through, but now they're back and folks are having a great time. In fact, the most fun of all is going to be when DawgNation sets sail with Royal Caribbean coming up in April. This isn't just any cruise. This is a DawgNation cruise. And you see right there some of the shots a moment ago of Perfect Day Coco Cay and some of the stuff. There, look at that shot of Perfect Day Coco Cay. For those of you watching on video, of course, the helium balloon that takes you up, 400 feet in the air, something like that. All the fun stuff to do on board a great ship like Independence of the Seas. This is going to be an incredible experience. So if you go to DawgNation.com, you'll see a link right at the top of the page for the DawgNation Cruise. Our friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority are helping us get this booked. So please check them out. Please be a part of this. It's going to be fun. Thanks to all of you who've already made plans to do that. Can't wait to hear even more from some of you who are going to be doing the same thing. It's going to be a great time. All right, so cruising on the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean right now. Let me hit a few notes here for a moment. So Florida was busy this weekend the start of the Billy Napier era. Kamari Wilson, 5-star safety, was there. Sean Washington, Georgia defensive line coming out of Louisiana, he was there as well. And, obviously Kamari was very active on social media related to some of this kind of stuff. I am still of the belief that this is probably a little too late. Like a lot of the stuff that Billy Napier is doing as Florida coach, and by the way, a lot of folks have kind of wondered. I shouldn't be doing this now, but a lot of folks have been kind of wondering. Okay, with Dan Mullen gone, you no longer have a Florida coach that looks like Cousin Eddie. What are you going to do for Billy Napier? I think I've decided who it is that Billy Napier looks like. I think some of you, if you look at it long and hard enough, I think you can kind of figure that out there as well. We may talk more about this in the time to come. But I think that Napier's fairly well a dead ringer for somebody that's kind of, achieved some pop culture fame. So we'll talk more about that there at the time. But, Napier right now is just kind of doing the stuff that Florida should have been doing a long time ago. And if Florida had been doing a lot of this kind of stuff, then maybe Dan Mullen wouldn't have lost his job. So I don't quite know what I think of, Sean being there. But in the case of Kamari Wilson being there, my guess is this is probably too little too late. But nonetheless, in the future, Billy Napier is going to try to make Florida a recruiting presence. But this is what you're supposed to do. I mean, this notion of, we're going to do BA now that Florida's recruiting. Well, I guess the assumption I've always had is that Florida would recruit. Frankly, I thought it was a little weird they weren't. So, the idea that I'm going to be cowering under my table because Florida's going to try to recruit now, it's going to hire, support staff, and they're going to do social media edits, and they're going to do the kinds of things that programs are supposed to be doing anyway. Why would I be afraid of that? That's what you assume is the cost of doing business in the SEC, that you're going to be doing those kinds of things. So, that was the situation there with Florida. On the Auburn side of things, another Georgia rival that's had quite a tumultuous weekend. So reports are that Auburn's two biggest names, quarterback Bo Nix and Tank Bigsby, are going to go to the transfer portal. I believe the Nix thing is official, whereas like the Bigsby thing is still, I guess, in the reportedly stage. It was also really weird that Brian Harsin had some stuff on Twitter that was like very subtweety, quoting John Gordon about being a good team member or, being committed to this, committed to that. Like that was very jilted lover type stuff from Brian Harsin, who you just get the impression if he could get a job offer anywhere else. Like Brian Harsin, this is your SAT analogy of the day. Like Brian Harsin is to Urban Meyer as, whatever else. Like much the same way that Urban Meyer, I think if he could get fired from the Jacksonville Jaguars, he'd be the happiest day of his life. I think Brian Harsin would love nothing more than to be fired from Auburn right now. I don't think he likes the SEC. I think the SEC plays too rough for him. I think that he's way happier out west where they just don't take this stuff quite so seriously. I think he'd love nothing more than to move on, but I think for now Auburn ain't quite in a position to make a move against Harsin like this after just 1 year, and maybe Harsin couldn't even beat out the Georgia defensive coordinator for the Oregon head coaching job, so he's kind of stuck there for right now. So he's kind of pouting on social media about Nick's doing what he's doing. Now you got Bigsby kind of doing the same thing. It's a weird time to be an Auburn fan. I mean, it is a weird time to be an Auburn fan, and I don't really quite know what you build your program around moving forward here, but to have both your big names, I mean, these are the guys on the cover of the media guide, Nix, Bigsby. These are the guys that you put on the tickets next year. You know what I'm saying? Like, to the extent that you even have, like, printed tickets, these are the guys that kind of show up. When the tickets come in the mail, it's Nix and Bigsby's face were kind of all over the whole thing. And they ain't a very good chance not to be there anymore. So I'm not really quite so sure how the Auburn thing goes. Obviously, Georgia fans are very well aware that Tank Bigsby was once very much on Georgia's radar from a recruiting standpoint, and I don't have any reason to believe that Georgia wouldn't be interested in the Bigsby situation again. If he is certainly on the open market again as a transfer, Georgia stands to lose a couple of running backs and probably needs more running backs. And on the one hand, a guy like Branson Robinson comes in as a terrific recruit. I think Robinson's going to have a great future at Georgia. Jordan James kind of the same way. And then you think about the guys you have between Deshaun Edwards, who I'm ready to see get some more carries. I mean, I'm ready to see Edwards get his shot to maybe make a move up the depth chart, maybe for next year. I just like the way that he runs. Clearly, Kenny McIntosh in kind of that mold. Obviously, Kendall Milton's kind of been plagued with injuries a little bit, but you hope that he gets a chance to show maybe even the college football playoff, but certainly next year kind of show more about what he's all about. But that doesn't mean that you don't want to be as deep as you can. Running back's one of those spots where you go from, oh my gosh, Georgia's got way too many running backs, to, oh my gosh, Georgia has just enough running backs. That's just kind of the way that position kind of goes. So if you have a chance to add a transfer back, maybe not just Bigsby, that might not be the only name that Georgia considers there. But if I had to guess, I'm guessing they make some sort of consideration there on that front. Also, we haven't talked much about this, but it's been out there now for a while. One of the silliest and, frankly, one of the worst stories in college football over the course of the last few months is the big quarterback prospect out of Texas, Quinn Ewers, who decided to forego his senior season, went to Ohio State, supposedly got $1 million for doing so, in an NIL deal. Still don't really fully believe all of that. But went up there, stayed there for like 5 minutes, and he's transferring again. Now he's going to the University of Texas. I mean, this is one of those things where, we're seemingly kind of making child stars out of, young athletes. And I don't know if you've really seen the trajectory for most child stars. Not exactly a great track record for like post-child star success with some of that kind of stuff. But nonetheless, Ewers kind of bounced around. Now he's at Texas. And I'm sure Texas is very glad to have him. They should be. He's a terrific quarterback prospect. Maybe now he'll kind of find a home and start to kind of restabilize his life after what has been kind of an erratic last few months for him. But I'm also left to wonder, okay, so if, this top quarterback prospect is now at Texas, Texas has also been one of those schools that we've kind of heard mentioned for Arch Manning as maybe some of the chief. I mean, we have every reason to believe that Georgia is very much a factor in the Arch Manning recruitment class of 2023. Texas also kind of thought to be one of those there as well. I know Manning recently took a visit to Alabama, of course, and schools like that are going to probably at some point in time emerge in this discussion too. But you kind of wondered, does the presence of Ewers have any impact on Arch Manning whatsoever? I think it's probably too early to know that right now. But upon seeing the Ewers story, that was like the first thing that kind of came to my mind is, I wonder what this means for Arch Manning, because we've certainly heard Texas and Arch mentioned there plenty of times. A couple of other stories there very quickly. Maybe not a surprise, but Hendon Hooker's coming back to Tennessee. What was a surprise how good Hendon Hooker turned out to be. This is a guy that I didn't make too much of when he transferred over from Virginia Tech, and at the beginning of the season, he wasn't even named Tennessee starter, but he turned out to be a pretty good quarterback for Josh Heupel, so he is coming back. I guess there was some thought maybe he might try the NFL draft, but he's going to come back to Tennessee, so that's a pretty big piece of news there for the Vols, a program that needs some stability. I guess Hooker's return provides that. And then Mike Elko, Texas A&M defensive coordinator, is moving over to become Duke head coach. Todd Monken's name kind of came up on that Duke rumor mill for like 5 seconds, but didn't really ever materialize much beyond that. There was also like the weird Jason Garrett rumor that the NFL guy would be coming down to the college ranks to be Duke head coach, but ultimately it's Elko they settle in on. And here's the one thing you can't overlook, is that this has been quite a resurgence for defensive coaches in terms of getting head coaching jobs this offseason. Obviously, Lanning to Oregon's example of that. Brent Venables to Oklahoma, a very high-profile example of that. Elko to Duke. The Penn State DC got the Virginia Tech head coaching job. You've also got some defensive coordinators now kind of shifting around for big dollars as a replacement for some of these guys too. That we're in clearly an offensive revolution in college football, and that's still ongoing. But it's kind of the year that defense struck back at least a little bit. Michigan is in the playoff largely because of its defense. Cincinnati kind of is too. Georgia certainly is in the playoff because of its defense. And a lot of these defensive-minded head coaches are getting big-time head coaching jobs now. Defensive-minded assistant coaches moving on to become head coaches in a way in the past would have been exclusively filled by offensive guys. That's not quite been the story for this offseason. That's at least worth paying attention to. And for now, we'll make that your SEC through. And I'm going to have a little fun at my own expense here coming up in a moment. But before that, I want to tell you about a really fun thing that's going to be going down coming up at Kroger. A very, very fun autograph book signing experience with the legendary former coach Vince Dooley. So I want to make sure I give you all the details on this. You've heard about the book Dooley's Playbook. I've actually told you about this before. Well, he's going to be coming up at the Sugar Hill Kroger. That's 6001 Cumming Highway. That's 6001 Cumming Highway in Sugar Hill from 4 to 6 p.m. tonight. Of course, December 13th was I'm telling you about all of this. Your chance to be a part of this with Vince Dooley coming up. What an unbelievable book this is. What a chance to meet one of the great Georgia legends. and celebrating a great book that kind of goes back through like some of the legendary plays in the history of Georgia football. Of course, it's 34 of these plays, and you kind of have an idea why Coach Dooley selected the number 34 for all of that. But he kind of goes back through, kind of tells you the story about how all of this goes down. Also, Steve Penley, the terrific artist, has a painting for each of these plays that kind of helps celebrate the great Georgia lore that the play kind of fits into with all of that. It's just a terrific, terrific thing, a great way to kind of walk back through all of Bulldog history. And listen, I've had a chance to spend a lot of time with Coach Dooley, and one of the things I can tell you about him is he's incredibly gracious. He loves not just writing stories about Georgia football, and obviously Dooley's Playbook is an example of that, but he loves telling these stories personally. So if you stop by and see him today, if you get your book signed by him, not only will you have a great autograph gift, a great cherished keepsake, a signed book by Vince Dooley, but you're also going to collect for yourself a great personal memory too, because he loves visiting with folks in person. He does this a lot, and this time of year for us, it's really become a holiday tradition to celebrate Coach Dooley doing some book signings at a local Kroger. So let me give you one more time the details about this. I want you to stop by and see Coach Dooley. I want you to enjoy Dooley's Playbook, just one of the great books. Dooley's a very accomplished author, and Dooley's Playbook is one of his best, celebrating 34 of the great plays in Georgia history. Steve Penley paintings to go along with that. That's all part of that there as well. You can get a book, get it signed by Coach Dooley at the Kroger in Sugar Hill today. That's 6001 Cumming Highway, Sugar Hill. 6001 Cumming Highway in Sugar Hill. It's 4 to 6 p.m. today. That's December 13th. So please make sure you check all of that out today. So great stuff there from Coach Dooley. So I'm going to kind of do a golden shoe here, kind of related to me here a little bit. I think I might have to send out a cease and desist letter because a fairly prominent figure within the ranks of college football is kind of stepping on my turf there a little bit. A lot of you saw the very awkward video this weekend of now LSU coach Brian Kelly. And it's still a little bit hard to say that out loud. That still seems a little weird to say. LSU coach Brian Kelly, but that is his current job. Of course, he was meeting with a high-profile quarterback recruit, and that young man shared the video of a very awkward dancing Brian Kelly. And a lot of you just see the dance. You don't maybe click into the video, but when you do, you hear the song that they're dancing to, of course, a song that means a lot to LSU fans. It's Callin' Baton Rouge by Garth Brooks. Let me show you this on the screen here. A lot of you saw this already, but for those of you that only saw Kelly dancing, you didn't realize what he was dancing to. It was Callin' Baton Rouge by Garth Brooks. Take a look at this. So that's Brian Kelly doing that. He's dancing there to that. Now, the problem here is, for me anyway, when it comes to awkward dancing to Garth Brooks songs, I cornered the market on that world a long time ago. I mean, a lot of y'all remember this from September. Can we show the video of me? A lot of you remember this from me going back to September when I was dancing to my own Garth Brooks tune way back there. Yeah, see, like, I mean, if we're going to do awkward dancing to Garth Brooks songs and karaoke performances, listen, I was doing that way before Brian Kelly was. So I'm going to give myself the golden shoe today. I'm going to let Brian Kelly know that my lawyers will be in contact with him very soon about a cease and desist letter as he tries to step on my own turf here on this. Of course, LSU football coaches hearing from lawyers is nothing new, but nonetheless, just be careful, Brian. Be very, very careful on all of this, that if you're going to by the way, how much heavier am I in that picture than I am right now? It's amazing how much weight I've lost over the course of the season. I'd already started losing some weight right there, but I'm much thinner now than I was then. So pretty amazing stuff there on that. Brian Kelly doing his awkward dance for the Garth Brooks song, me doing mine far before that. I'll make myself the golden shoe winner, and maybe I'll give one to Brian Kelly there on that too. By the way, before we wrap up here today, let me also remind you about my friends at Space Dogs. You know, the crypto space can be mysterious. You hear a lot about it, but you don't really know what it is, and you don't really know yet if you should be involved in it, and you kind of wonder, Well, what even is it really? Well, at its very simplest essence, it's just a safe and secure way to make the transactions that you're already doing online even more safe and secure. And that's where Space Dogs kind of steps in here. They got a great array of products you need to be aware of. They got their Space Token that you should know about. They've got their Space Card, their Dog's Wallet. All of this, just a way to make safer, more secure transactions online. You've heard about the crypto space. You want to learn more about it? Well, how about learning about it from good UGA folks who love the dogs and love our audience here at DawgNation, love the crypto space, and want you to be a part of that in a very fun way. So they explain it so much better than I ever could. So here's the next simple step for you to take. Just check out their website. It's actually a really cool website, very, very informative. Dogs.io is the website, DAWGS. Dogs.io. Learn about crypto. Learn about how you can be involved in crypto. Learn about the Dogs Token, the Space Card, the Dogs Wallet, all kinds of really cool stuff going on from our friends at Space Dogs in the crypto space. Find out more about that today. Dogs.io for more details on that. So, yeah, Brian Kelly doing what he does, I don't know about that. That's obviously a little silly from him, but if we're going to do silly Garth Brooks dances, let's remember who was doing those first there on that. By the way, thanks to all of you for being with us. Obviously going to be a very busy next couple of days. We're going to be all over the early signing period to start to that. Live coverage of recruiting announcements. We have some of that for you. Rumors and innuendo and all that stuff related to who's going where. You better believe that. We'll hear from Kirby Smart again on Wednesday, which will be interesting, not just for the hay in the barn for the start of the early signing period, but for also the beginning of preparations for the Orange Bowl. It's been a little quiet on the team front as of late because all the coaches who've been out and about and on the move from a recruiting standpoint, but we'll hear more about the Orange Bowl as you head towards Wednesday. So it's going to be a big, busy week around DawgNation, so we appreciate you being a part of all of it. As far as our Gator Hater countdown goes, 320 days from now, Dogs get another win against Florida. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door. And on video. Time now for RS Andrews Cooldown. Appreciate all of you being here with us today for all of that. And we'll get your comments here live on video, DawgNation.com, Facebook, and YouTube. We'll talk more about the Lanning stuff. We'll talk more about the recruiting stuff. We will just try to talk about all of it. And if you want to make fun of me for how I dance, you can also do that there as well. Matt Rukavine on the subject of Dabo Swinney. Yeah, I've heard from a lot of Clemson fans on this lately. Our buddy Jordan Bowman's also a pretty common commenter on our YouTube side, big Clemson fan. They ain't used to this world. And listen, I probably respect Dabo Swinney more than some of y'all probably wish I would, to be honest with you. But I like Dabo a little bit. And, he's run a fairly drama-free program for the most part. Well, it ain't that way no more. And I'm using bad grammar intentionally. They're losing coaches, they're losing recruits, and, listen, it's still a good program. I'm guessing they replace everything they're losing fairly well. But, Georgia embraces the drama of recruiting. They don't mind their guys taking visits. They don't mind going after guys who are committed elsewhere. Kirby Smart is more than happy to fight a war on 25 fronts when it comes to recruiting. He's happy to go down to the wire on every – sometimes I kind of wonder, how much – disarray he's actually truly comfortable with in recruiting, because this is a little bit different kind of year, but there are some moments kind of late stage of the recruiting cycle where you're still not quite so sure who's going to be Georgia's 25, and Smart's just sort of okay with that. He's very comfortable being uncomfortable. For the most part, Clemson fans have not had a whole lot of experience with that. They are not quite as comfortable being uncomfortable right now, and you see evidence of that. Let's see what else. Spencer Quarles, great to see him. He says, what a great surprise it was on Friday to shake your hand as I was on the field going to represent Georgia Farm Bureau and present my son's school, Benedictine, with their Quad A state championship trophy. Go Dogs, go Benedictine. Yes, Spencer, it was great to see you there as well. That was really fun. Listen, BC played really, really well. That's a very good football team, and I haven't had a lot of I've been around high school football a lot in my life. I have not had a lot of experience being around state championship games. I did a state title game 100 years ago, and I really hadn't done a state title game since then. So just being there for some of the action over the weekend was really fun for me. And I was very impressed with Benedictine for sure. Danny Starn says, was hiring Kirby a mistake? No, I would say it was not a mistake. I would say that Georgia's very happy to have hired Kirby Smart. Hugh Nash says Schumann needs to be promoted and paid and let Muschamp serve as co-DC. We can't lose Glenn. Yeah, I would think they're going to do everything they can to keep Glenn Schumann. I think they are certainly going to do that. He says Glenn offers defensive symmetry and amazing recruiting. He also has young and relatable, and he's loved by players. Yeah, I would say that. If I can just be very candid for a moment, some of what Georgia may try to do here is provide some cover for Schumann a little bit. This is not reporting. This is just my opinion. This is just me speculating out loud. I think Kirby probably sees the way in which a young defensive coordinator like Tosh Lapoy was absolutely ransacked by Alabama fans and scapegoated after the 2018 national championship game loss. And I think that Smart, if he can provide a little bit of cover for Schumann on that, is going to be happy to do that. In other words, if Glenn Schumann becomes Georgia defensive coordinator, I think he'll be great at the job. But if Kirby can pair Schumann with a guy like Muschamp and say they're co-DCs, then suddenly that gives Schumann a little bit of cover underneath someone who's got a lot more coaching experience. Here's what I can tell you. That Will Muschamp's coaching ambition right now is probably not to be Georgia defensive coordinator. He either wants to be a head coach or he wants to be nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's rich enough that he can just go sit at the pool if he wants to. So, ultimately, Muschamp is either not interested in being a coach or he wants to be a head coach again. But, like, being Georgia defensive coordinator is not the kind of thing he wants to do for the next 10 years. If I had to guess, that's what I'm probably assuming. I think that Muschamp's kind of living his best life right now. Yes, he was an on-field coach for Georgia, but, he's hanging around with his family. He's got a son that's still in high school. He's able to watch him play, my understanding is, that he's, as he should, spent some time doing that. So I don't know that Will Muschamp is just like dying to be Georgia defensive coordinator. It's a job that he's capable of doing, of course, but his presence as co-DC may be as much as anything about giving a little bit of cover for Glenn Schumann. That way that Schumann can't get, unfairly pegged with, he's too young for the job or something like that. He can say, well, it's me and it's Will Muschamp. That just kind of gives you the bulletproof, level of protection there. And that the more time passes, the more it's maybe, Schumann who expands in that role a little bit. Maybe Will Muschamp goes and becomes a head coach again somewhere else, or, whatever it is that he just sort of chooses to do next with his career. That just may be how that works out. Because remember, when Kirby first hired Lanning, he was also kind of paired as co-DC with Glenn Schumann. And they didn't make any kind of big deal about hiring Lanning. They tried to go as long as they could without announcing it at all. Because I think, once again, they were fairly protective of a young defensive coordinator, something that when Alabama lost the national title game, you had all these Alabama fans that just pointed their arrows right at Tosh Lapoy on that, and Lapoy was jettisoned. I just think you want better for that for Glenn Schumann if you can. Let me go to YouTube for a moment. By the way, I kept my promise. There were two things on Friday I said I would not talk about today, and I didn't talk about them during the show. Now, of course, the Dan Lanning news made it easier not to do that. But even as some of the commenters are trying to draw me off sides here, I'm going to just easily sidestep around it. Green Apple Fossaway says that Muschamp's swimming in all his buyout money, Scrooge McDuck style. Yeah, listen, I'm telling you right now, he says he doesn't have to answer all the tough questions that a head coach does. I'm telling you right now, like, a lot of my good friends are very good high school coaches. And, listen, if you want to make the bet, like a high school head coach is good money. That's a very nice salary, and it can help you, take care of your family and things like that. But I also hear from a lot of these guys who already have their retirement plans worked out, that eventually, because they love the sport or whatever sport it is they coach, they love that sport, but they love nothing more than to be an assistant coach. The financial incentive to be a head coach is great enough they choose to do that. But their big dream is to go be an assistant coach on somebody else's staff. Let that guy get all the criticism. In high school, it's about dealing with parents more so than media. But let that guy deal with the parents. Let that guy, kind of deal with the administration. I'm just going to come out here and coach ball every single day. Trust me, I have so many high school coaches that talk all the time about when they finally do enough time to justify making that move. They can't wait to go be assistant coaches again. So I guarantee you Will Muschamp is having the time of his life right now. You know, he's not meeting with the media. He gets to do some recruiting. I'm sure he probably actually enjoys that. You know, he gets, just like as somebody said, Scrooge McDuck type money. You coach 2 SEC schools. Trust me, Muschamp's a rich guy. And I'm just guessing that Muschamp is not exactly in a hurry to kind of mess all that up. The only thing that more responsibility could do is mess that up. Yeah, Ryan, I said that he was co-DC about 100 times, but thanks. But once again, that's one of those things that was kind of in, title. Obviously, Lanning is the one that took the forefront when there was an opportunity to speak. That was Lanning that was doing that each and every time. Green Soldier says, what about Mike Bobo potentially getting a quarterback analyst job? That would be good. Yeah, listen, I don't really know what Bobo wants next. I think that the problem for Mike is I just think that he made a decision to go provide some SEC credibility to a guy like Brian Harsin, and he just hitched his wagon to the wrong dude. So Bobo's out now. I believe that Harsin's probably out after next year. It's just a bad situation. Harsin's just not long for the SEC. Bobo tried to, once again, provide him some cover. Sometimes these coaching hires are about providing cover for other people, and Bobo gave Harsin some cover. You couldn't say, well, Harsin doesn't know the SEC when he had Derek Mason as his defensive coordinator and Mike Bobo as his offensive coordinator. Well, you try to lend that credibility to him, but ultimately, Harsin just may not last. And so, Bobo's got to choose his next job carefully, I would say. And so sometimes taking a year to do that makes some sense. Mark Brantley says, I just hope that Trey Scott sticks around and doesn't follow Dan. Yeah, I like Trey Scott a lot. I do. And if he got offered defensive coordinator job, I'm guessing he's probably taking that because that's a really good job to be defensive coordinator at Oregon. Like the one thing that you have to give Kirby credit for, and we could make a list of all the things that we wish was different about Kirby Smart because any human being is going to have strengths and weaknesses. So this is not to say that Kirby is infallible in all ways, but do not discount how well Smart has identified guys who had very little resume before Smart hired them. Dan Lanning was working at Memphis. A few years before that, he was teaching middle school. And, Smart clearly identified a coach that was worth getting to know. A star on the rise, Smart identified him. Before Glenn Schumann came around as a coach on the staff, he wasn't a coach at all. He was still only an analyst. This was a very young guy when Smart identified him as someone he absolutely wanted on his first staff. That takes a keen eye for talent. In the case of Trey Scott, he had been at UNC, but at the time in which Scott was at Chapel Hill, they weren't recruiting at the same weight class they are now. He had just taken the Ole Miss job, but once again, he had not been on that job long enough to have really any kind of track record for really acquiring top recruits. But Smart clearly identified it, and I guess it was part of that was through his, the connections that he'd had. Was it Pete Jenkins that he'd kind of come up working underneath, and so you had some sense of what Scott was because of who he had worked underneath. But it's not like Trey Scott had some huge recruiting, or I should say coaching resume in his background, but much the same way that Smart identified something in Lanning, identified something in Schumann, he also identified that pretty clearly in Trey Scott. Trey Scott's one of the best assistant position coaches in the entire country. He's just as good as it gets. And Smart identified that. So there's never going to be enough elite position coaches to go around. The same scarcity of talent that exists with players also exists with those position coaches too. There are just not going to be enough of them. It's why the same half dozen people kind of bounce from job to job to job is because there's only so many people that can do it. To handle the grind that comes the way of being a coach at this level, it's just not for everybody. And you're always having to try to acquire what you can acquire, keep who you can keep, but you've also got to be looking for that next generation too, young guys who are ready for that kind of role, that kind of responsibility. And Smart's done a good job of identifying those. Let's see what else. Crow King 123 says, if guys leave to take better jobs, tip your hat as they lead, as long as they leave the right way. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably true. And, I mentioned I was with Shane Beamer for a little bit on Friday, and, one of the things he talked about kind of privately before our interview began was that he really liked his time working in Athens. It seems like he felt pretty well taken care of by Kirby. And, that's something else that matters too. Like, trust me, there are a lot of these coaches that don't like each other very much. And there are a lot of guys working for guys they don't like very much. If you can avoid that at Georgia, it's one of those things that we would never know, that if so-and-so assistant hated so-and-so coach, like for the most part, the average fan's not going to really find that out. But that is going to be a little bit of sand in the engine, right? That's going to be a little bit of grit that just kind of slows down the functioning of the engine if you have guys not getting along very well. Think about Georgia in 2015 as an example of that. So if you can avoid that, it's just good for everybody. And this is one of the things that I always had a problem with Nick Saban. He seemed to really be offended that Scott Cochran wanted professional development, that he wanted to leave for a bigger and better job, and that's just not the way that it is. Like, if you want to be the kind of head coach that assistant coaches want to work for, you better be the kind of head coach that creates open doors for those coaches to get bigger and better jobs somewhere else. Because here's what I can tell you. Nobody's professional ambition is to be subservient to you. They may be willing to do that for a number of years as a way of getting where they want to go, but no one's dream in life is to be your lieutenant. Whoever you are, whatever you do for a living, no one dreams of serving you for their entire life. That's just not the way that life works. People dream about going on and doing bigger and better things. So if you want good people, you better have a pathway towards achievement for those people. Otherwise, they're gone. Paul Moon, I said I wouldn't talk about quarterbacks. Does talking about old Georgia quarterbacks, what does that come in all of this? Because Paul Moon talking about some old Georgia quarterbacks in here. John Adams on the subject of Dell McGee to tank. Yeah, listen. If you got a guy like Dell, that gives you a chance there. Paul Moon says I need to challenge Brian Kelly to a dance-off. I'd like that. We should do that. Let me go back over to Facebook for a minute. We're going to get ready to go after this. Let's see what else. Greg Childers says Lanning staying through the playoffs shows you the love he has for Kirby and the players. I respect that. Yeah, I respect that too. And listen, no one's going to assume that Lanning is giving his full attention to Georgia right now, but I think that's probably fine. I don't think you should have to do that. Daniel Aldridge said, I'd rather be a great DC than a bad head coach. Let me tell you why I wouldn't do that. Here's the person I always think about when it comes to stuff like this. This is going to be a weird analogy, but follow me on this for a moment. So do y'all remember when Jeff Francoeur was with the Braves? This is like when he first came up as a rookie in 2005. And like when you first come up Major League Baseball, you're making the Major League minimum and stuff like that. Well, the Braves, seeing the early success that Francoeur had, went and offered him a long-term salary as a way of avoiding arbitration with him. I think that some of y'all are better with memory and numbers than I am, but wasn't it like 3 years, $24 million or something like that they offered him as a way of avoiding arbitration? And he turned it down. And then, unfortunately, things didn't quite work out for Jeff again, and he never got that long-term offer from the Braves again. Now, Jeff went on to play a lot of Major League Baseball. My guess is he's a pretty rich guy because of it. But that's $24 million that he never got. He could have gotten it, never got it. He bet on himself and risked it in the hopes that he could get more later on. But as it turns out, that bet didn't come true. And that's $24 million that he could have had added to whatever else that he made that he just didn't get. It's the same thing. I don't think you're going to see very many coaches at all turn down any head coaching job anymore. I just don't think, the way in which Kirby Smart turned down jobs waiting for a chance for a place like Georgia, or like Mark Richt before that would have turned down jobs waiting for the kind of job that was offered to him eventually, like a Georgia. These programs now, even like the middle tier programs, are offering long-term contracts on a multi-million-dollar per annum deal. Like, that's just the kind of money that you can't turn that down. I would suggest you'd be a fool to turn it down, because if you want to be a great defensive coordinator, then come back and be one. Go be an awful head coach for 5 years or 3 years or however long they give you. Take that guaranteed money, put it in your pocket, and then come back and be a great defensive coordinator. But do so $50 million richer or $40 million richer or whatever you're going to be for having done that. I mean, I just think that we can't discount what generational wealth means. That it's one thing to make $1 million or $2 million, and goodness knows that I'd love to make that kind of money. It's another thing to kind of get the generational wealth handed to you that comes from one of these long-term head coaching deals. So, I mean, I'm going to be frank with you. There seems to be a lot of very weird stuff going on at Oregon right now. And I'm not quite so sure that Lanning's actually going to be all that happy at Oregon. I kind of hope that he is. I hope he wins there. I'll be cheering for him. There's a little bit of weirdness at Oregon right now. The Justin Wilcox stuff and some of the things like that. Something kind of strange is happening up there at the moment. Plus, everything about college football on the West Coast is just strange to begin with. So there's a chance that he may go up there. He's a young guy. This is a very, very big job for a young guy to get. This job may not go well for Dan Lanning. There's at least a possibility that's the case. But you know what? If it doesn't, he's going to be richer than most human beings could ever dream about doing. And if he wants to come back and be a great defensive coordinator, he can come back and do that again. I'm sure Georgia would welcome him back with open arms. But he's got the kind of money that most corporations couldn't generate. Randy Hall mentions Derek Dooley. This is a good example of that. So Dooley's at Louisiana Tech, losing record as a head coach there. Goes to Tennessee, gets the kind of buyout money that a Tennessee head coach would get. And he's been like what? He was Missouri offensive coordinator. He's been a position coach in the NFL. He just bounced around living the football life, but he's doing so as what you would assume is a very rich man. Sandy Price says, BA, do not lose Glenn Schumann. He's a great coach and recruiter. He's been there a long time, paid his dues. I agree with Sandy on all of this. And this is just kind of goes to show you Georgia fans are sharp. They don't miss much. You know, Schumann is a well-known commodity to most Georgia fans. And if we all know this, Georgia knows this there as well. They're going to do everything they can to keep Glenn Schumann. I think they are. And my guess is they will. Because if you're Schumann, hard not to notice that, you know, the two previous guys to have the job you're about to have at least a part of are as rich as the Monopoly man now. It's hard not to notice that, you know, Mel Tucker has got $100 bills blowing out his car window when he drives down the road. That hard not to notice that if you're Glenn Schumann. So my guess is that probably helps Georgia keep him. Joseph Kennedy says Mullen might become an offensive coordinator at a high school. Maybe he can go be Phillip Rivers' offensive coordinator. That's very funny. Tim Tatum nails it. Yeah, Billy Napier looks just like the dude from Sling Blade. Just like he looks just like that guy. Scott Smith says, why do we need code DCs? As I said before, I think part of this is to provide a little bit of cover for Schumann so that he can grow into that role. And, you know, Muschamp kind of brings the credibility, the experience. Schumann brings a lot of I expect Glenn Schumann to be a great defensive coordinator at Georgia, but it's kind of nice to not have all of the attention on you. And so Muschamp kind of shades him from some attention while Schumann grows into the role. This seems like a pretty Kirby Smart thing to do, to be honest with you. Yeah, Tim Tatum, you're 100% right about that. That's exactly what I think he looks like. Exactly what I think he looks like. Steve Island says, talking everything except Michigan, what happened to keeping the main thing the main thing? Well, for today, this kind of is the main thing, though, right? I mean, the Lanning thing just happened. Signing day is Wednesday. So, trust me, right now, Kirby Smart's attention's a lot more on Lanning and recruiting than it is on Michigan. After Wednesday, that changes. But that's kind of just where things are right now. Yeah, Scott, thanks for the good comment, too. Randy Hall says, an animated dance-off of Mullen, Kelly, and you. Yeah, listen, I'm not going to lie to you. Like, the Mullen TikTok thing where he and his wife do that one dance. Like, that's actually, like, that's way better than what I could do. Because I showed that dance to my daughter. She's only 6, and she liked it. And so we've tried to do it a few times. And so I'm pretty sure I'm a better dancer than Brian Kelly is. But Dan Mullen's a better dancer than me. The problem with Dan Mullen is he's probably spent more time dancing than he did recruiting during the pandemic. That's probably the problem that he has. But while I am very confident that I can outdance Brian Kelly, I can't do that one like TikTok thing that Dan did with Megan. I can't do that because I'm embarrassed to say that I did try to do that with my daughter. Brad Cassie, thanks for the kind words. Oh, yeah, Matt Rukavina also in the Dabo Swinney. He has a very bad TikTok dance. A very bad TikTok dance. Richard Dees in the subject of Travis Hunter. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I have to say on this is I'd love to have him, Richard. I'd love to have him. And if somebody's going to report that maybe that's still alive, I'd be very happy about that. I mean, we do know that he's, been in Athens at least 3 times? And if he's been there 3 times, and then the real number's probably higher than that, we do know that, right? He's a game-changing player, man. I mean, he's still probably hurt. Just knowing what we know about football, that he's still probably a little bit banged up. And you watch that game on TV on Saturday, he just takes it over. And that was the thing that when I saw him for the first time, he's going up against other guys who had major college offers. And the way that he runs his routes, and admittedly, knowing Georgia's needed wide receiver, I'm a little bit attracted to him as a receiver right now, even though I think he's a lockdown cornerback. But the way that he runs his routes, he just creates so much separation that, I'd love nothing more than to have him. And if I'm, supposed to speak this into existence, I guess I'll try. But he's also been pretty steadfast in his Florida State love too, right? So, Rome Dog on the possibility of Zeus staying one more year. I guess I'd be really surprised about that. I guess, but I guess I'd be surprised about that. I know. I guess what Mike had mentioned something about him not officially declaring for the NFL draft yet. Yeah, I don't know if that's just a formality or what. I didn't make too much out of that. I do know Mike had said something about that, but I don't know. At a certain point in time, obviously you want to, not give your carries away for free at the college level. You want to get paid for them. So, that might be, what Zamir's ready to do there on that. Glenn Townsend on the subject of any potential signing day surprises. I don't know. We talked about, Marvin Jones a little earlier. That's obviously a name I'd love to see Georgia more involved with. I think what might be an interesting signing day surprise is somebody, who's, yeah, I don't know about that yet. Let me just hold off on saying that yet. Randy Hall says, what about Trayvon Walker coming back? I'd love to. I'd love that to be the case. I just don't know if his draft status is just going to justify it. You got to think NFL draft scouts are going to love Trayvon Walker. You got to think. But if a guy like that were to come back, that changes everything for 2022. John Hendricks on Christian Miller. Yeah. So first of all, the good news on Miller is, and I mentioned this during the regular show, sounds like the injury that he sustained in the state championship, not too serious, which is good news. That's another guy that you're kind of watching for right now. Now, the early anticipation was that Miller wasn't going to decide until February. So you'll keep your eye on Miller for a number of reasons. Does Georgia win out against Ohio State? We saw Ryan Day and Larry Johnson in home with Miller last week. We also saw some Georgia coaches in home shortly after that. So you're watching Georgia versus Ohio State for Christian Miller, but you're also watching that timeline for Miller too to see if that changes at any point. Bill Bourne says, if the Dogs come out on fire for the Orange Bowl, we're going to beat Michigan and get a rematch. Yeah, listen, that'd be fun. He says, but if they come out flat like Texas a couple of years ago, they're going to be in trouble. Yeah, I'm guessing you're not going to see a flat version of Georgia. Randy Hall says, other than Hunter, who are you the most impressed with this past weekend? the Auburn quarterback commit, Holden Geriner, in the game that I did for Benedictine, he's really good. He's really good. He's one of the best quarterbacks I saw all year. He's very, very good. He was, truly one of the best. And the other guy that I really like right now, I like Cole Spear a lot. When I saw Spear for the game that we did this year, I think Cole Spear is really very athletic. Very athletic. A reasonable facsimile of JT Daniels has shown up in the comments section. It's always great to see. Jonathan Moore saying that Sugar Bowl against Texas wasn't a playoff a couple of years ago, and I do think that matters. Brad Cassidy also kind of weighing in on the same topic. Philip Jordan Wells talking about Shelton in here. Here's what I noticed is that some of y'all are like so quick to like mute Shelton or whatever it is that you can do on Facebook, but then y'all still kind of like, he's like one of those guys that that some of y'all get rid of and then you kind of miss him when he's gone. Don't think I don't notice that. Daniel Aldridge, thanks for the kind word. Oh, yeah, Bill Sanders as well. JaFrederick Perry for Warner Robbins, man, he is good. He's good. I heard Rusty say this on the TV broadcast. He said that Perry, after the 5A game, could have just like gotten a drink of water and gone and played in the 7A game too. I really think he could have. I mean, when they lost their running back early in the year, that's a big loss. I mean, that's the kind of thing when you lose starting running back, that can really affect you. And Perry, who plays both sides of the ball, all their special teams, I think too. He's like on the field for literally every snap, and he stepped in at running back huge after Malcolm got hurt. So Fred Perry's a very good player, very good player. Calvin Sanders got the Dogs winning by 3 touchdowns against Michigan. Boy, that'd be something. Brandon Dawson gives you a go Demons. Pound for pound, Warner Robbins was as good as anybody. They were as good as anybody this year. I love the receiver, who I guess for now is going to Vanderbilt. What they did defensively to Gunner that night we saw him, that was really impressive. Getting those stops down. I'm sorry, I'm getting teams confused now. Pardon me. I'm getting Thomasville confused with Warner Robbins right there. But Warner Robbins pound for pound is impressive as anybody. Impressive as anybody. Let us see what else. Yeah, Frank Hilton, Bryce Thornton as well. I know Jeff likes Bryce a lot. Likes him a lot. That's a little bit of a UGA legacy tie-in there too, which is nice. Jeff likes Thornton a lot. He had a couple big licks too. He had a couple big hits too. He's a good player for sure. All right, we've got to go. Anything else? Grade A on the subject of injuries. I don't know that I put a lot on George about that. I mean, bad luck kind of happens. And by the way, this is not a Johnny-come-lately take for me. I always thought it was like really weird that Alabama was trying to like make a thing out of some of their injuries they dealt with a couple of years ago, and then like a couple of years ago, Auburn kind of the same thing. For the most part, I'm a believer that injuries just sort of happen. And there's typically not a lot of blame to go around for why it does. Last comments. Bill Hook says Thomasville put it on Gunner. He's going to be much better with better talent around him. Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I think that Gunner Stockton had a great senior season, great career. I mean, record-setting type career. He did run into a tough matchup that night in Thomasville in the game that we saw. But there's no question in my mind that that Gunner's a terrific prospect. All right, so we're going to go. Good comments. Appreciate you being here. Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Check them out online, ajc.com. Good stuff from Chip Towers on the Lanning news there on Friday on that. Also, you can check out the AJC for a lot more there as well. There's a very interesting new, it's like an electric vehicle plant. It's coming to Rutledge, Georgia. That's a kind of a beautiful area up there, kind of the east part of the state. Good story in the AJC about that. Also, the Falcons. How about getting a win yesterday against Carolina? Setting up a game against San Francisco this weekend that's got a little juice to it. It's kind of funny. I was thinking about this yesterday because I was following this Panthers game, Falcons-Panthers game. Like, this is the time of year every year. Every year works it the same way. like this is the time of year where I kind of get back into the NFL a little bit, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, who's leading what division. It just gets very hard to follow the NFL during the season. A lot of times on Sundays, that's one of my bigger high school prep days. That's when we get our next game going. I get going on that next game a lot there on that Sunday. I spend a lot of times on Sunday looking at high school football, and I just miss a lot in the NFL. I try to have the Red Zone channel on. I just end up missing a lot. I mean, I really couldn't tell you who's even leading like 3/4 of these divisions right now. But around this time of year, I'm always kind of right back in. And so yesterday I was kind of in on the Falcons and the Panthers and kind of getting ready for Falcons 49ers. So I'm kind of in on that now. Mark Bradley's got a good column up, ajc.com there as well. Also, a lot of family planning for holiday, not family planning, that's a different topic. A lot of families planning for holiday events, Christmas events, things like that. AJC.com's got some good stuff on that there too. So make sure you check that out. Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com. Also, R.S. Andrews, find them online for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised. The price is promised. Find R.S. Andrews today. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here at 9:45 tomorrow, 1st and 15, 10 a.m., DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then.